Heads up, if you've ever given your DNA to 23andMe, you should probably go and delete that right now. This morning, it was announced that 23andMe filed for bankruptcy and that its CEO, Ann Wojcicki, was resigning. 23andMe is, of course, the DNA testing company. They said that this morning, 23andMe shares dropped more than 50% in early trading after the company filed for bankruptcy late Sunday, blah, 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 shareholder value, whatever. Here is what's actually alarming. Quote, 23andMe's global database has grown into a virtually unprecedented repository of human genetic information that can now be sold in bankruptcy proceedings. That's right, the privacy statement of 23andMe says that, quote, if they are involved in a bankruptcy, merger, acquisition, reorganization, or sale of assets, your personal information may be accessed, sold, or transferred as part of that transaction. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the DNA that you've given them could be scooped up by whoever and used in all sorts of crazy ways. Things like maybe cloning you without your permission. Your DNA could be sold to malicious actors who could then use that DNA and leave it at crime scenes that you were never at. Of course, bioweapons is always a possibility. I mean, okay, those are admittedly kind of crazy examples. Maybe they won't happen. But then there are those mundane use cases that probably will happen. One of which is insurance companies using that DNA data to deny you coverage, which is something they definitely love to do. So if you don't want that, here are the instructions on how you can delete your data from 23andMe. Pause to read.
All right, folks, we are back here on WLTH 1370 AM. It is 6:52 in the PM. Oh my God. Oh my God. It is this first I was blown by. Yes, it has. It is 6:52 in the PM here on Friday, April the 4th, 2025. The future's here. The future is now. And if you listen to the intro there, you see that all this futuristic DNA research is turning out exactly how people thought it would. There were plenty of warnings about this, folks. As you heard in the intro and as I'm about to tell you, 23andMe, one of the biggest, most used DNA databases, is going bankrupt. Now, why is this important? It's important because millions, and I mean millions of Americans have sent their DNA to 23andMe with the hope that they would find their long lost relatives, or they would find, you know, where their ancestors came from. You know, a lot of people I know do that to find out, a lot of black people I know do that to try to find out where in Africa our ancestors came from, or whatever. Now, they are dealing with the possibility that their genetic data might be sold to anybody. That's right. Your DNA can be sold to anybody. Yes. And what they do with it, who knows? So this company is going through the bankruptcy proceedings. And this will ultimately, this case will be a major test of what the boundaries are, the legal boundaries are about privacy and data security. They have actually scheduled a May 14th auction to sell all their assets. And so who might buy it? What if the Chinese buy it? What if the Russians buy it? What if the Iranians buy it? What if, you know, Elon Musk decides he wants to start cloning people and he buys it? He can. He probably could. He could afford it. Now, what exactly do they have? They have the genetic profiles of 15 million people. The genetic profiles of 15 million people. That is incredible. When you consider how valuable DNA is now, health insurance companies use it to determine DNA tests to determine what your likelihood of catching certain diseases are, what your health risk outlook looks like. That way they can charge you more. We just saw a situation in California a few years ago where they actually caught the Golden State Killer because one of his relatives uploaded their DNA to one of those sites. They got a ping from that site for the relative and traced the relative back to the Golden State Killer. Now, I'm not saying that that is bad. That actually is a pretty cool way. Like, that's pretty cool to find like serial killers and things like that. But what you could have in this sort of authoritarian world we live in now, where the government is literally deporting people for being anti-Israel foreign policy, or Israel's policy, or being anti-American foreign policy, who's to say? Who's to say that in the near future, protesters, anti-government dissidents, people who just find themselves on the wrong side of the government for any reason, won't have their DNA stored and used against them and their families for all kinds of reasons? They might be able to find a piece of gum that was spit out during a protest and compare that DNA to something that's in their database and be like, oh yeah, you were at that protest. I got a piece of your gum from that protest you were at against the government. That's not too far-fetched. We've seen killers be caught because they were at a party, a birthday party, and the police actually dressed up that's how they caught if I'm not mistaken, that's how they caught the Grim Sleeper in LA. He was at a birthday party for like his grandkids or something, and the police pretended to be one of the waiters, and they actually got a cup and I think some pizza crust that he had eaten off of, and they had traced his DNA back to all those murders he committed. Again, that may be a cool way to use DNA, but I'm just saying it just shows you how extensive DNA is in telling us about you. This is the most personal of genetic information. Literally, the building blocks of you is your DNA. And anybody could have it and get custody of it at this point. Now, I will say California's Attorney General, Rob Bonta, has issued a consumer alert, and he said, look, you guys got to delete your genetic data. You can do that. If you were with 23andMe, hell, or any of these other DNA sites, if I were you, I would delete it. I'd delete all my genetic information from as many different databases as I can if I have the ability to do that. This is why I haven't spit in a cup and sent it off to one of those genetic databases yet anyway. I'm very into genealogy. I love my man Skip Gates and Finding Your Roots. I watch every episode if I can because I love seeing people trace their genetics back to Africa or back to Europe or Asia or wherever. I love hearing those stories and, seeing people find long lost relatives. But I genuinely don't want the government or any other corporations to have my DNA at this point. And so I've refrained from that, even though I've really, really been tempted to buy one of those genetic testing kits just to see, like, can I find out my full genetic lineage, my full heritage? So I'm just content at this point with doing it through paper, not literally paper, but just looking at the paper trail of, birth certificates and death certificates and marriage certificates. There's a lot of sites out there that allow you to do that. And I've actually found out a lot about my heritage on those type of sites that have allowed me to look through certain databases, not based on DNA though, but just on the records of the historical records. I prefer that personally. The company that was founded in 2006 claims in its court filings that their database represents one of the world's largest crowdsourced platforms for genetic resources and genetic research. Customer data is treated as a valuable asset that can be sold. Wow. Similar situations have occurred with patients that have bankrupt hospitals or customer data from failed retail chains. So this is a thing that's just becoming commonplace in this world that we live in, especially the more technology is taking over. Our data, our credit scores, our DNA, everything about us, all of our histories are being bought and sold on a regular basis. When you're on the internet, if you notice, you will see certain ads targeted at you specifically because they're looking at what you've been looking at, and they are targeting advertisements specifically at you. If you're online, you have this I got a smartphone right here in my hands. Sometimes I get different advertisements that are aimed at me, like, oh, you're a sports fan, okay, here's here's some sports apparel for you. Oh, okay. You bought this from Amazon recently. Would you like this? They follow all that. The scariest thing, at least the thing that might affect the most amount of people, is them finding out your health, your predisposition for certain conditions. Because people are already paying through the nose for health insurance. We talked about that last week, how premiums have skyrocketed in the wake of Obamacare. And it's going to get worse for a lot of you once they get their hands on your DNA and they see that you have a predisposition for diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, colon cancer, breast cancer, whatever. They're going to get that information. And they're going to charge you accordingly. Yes, they will. Now, all this has obviously caused a lot of unrest amongst the 23andMe DNA community. And so the 23andMe spokesperson has reassured their customers that they can delete their data through their accounts. And they don't even need to contact customer service or anything. So if you have your DNA in 23andMe, or to me, any of these genetic testing organizations, these genetic databases, I personally, like I said, I would not want my DNA out there. That's just me. Now, I know a lot of people out there, there's a lot of people out there who are orphans or who don't have a lot of family. And so they put their DNA in these genetic databases because they want to find long lost family, or maybe they have a long lost brother or sister or sibling that was put up for adoption or went missing or whatever. And when that happens, my heart goes out to those people who want to use DNA and genetic testing to make sure that they can sort of have a close to that book in the story, like create a book into the story where it's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know who I am. I don't know where my brother is, my sister is, my father is, my mother is, my son or my daughter. I understand that 100%. And I don't judge those people whatsoever. And for those people, maybe it is worth it. It might be worth it to you to maybe in the future be forced to pay higher premiums for your health insurance, or, run the risk of being cloned against your will, or whatever, have your genetic material used for some sort of scientific purposes that you don't like, if you can find your long lost daughter that you gave up for adoption when she was born and you were 17 and you couldn't take care of her or something. That might be worth it. But all I can do is just issue the warning that you got to be careful with this stuff. You really do. I'm so glad that this happened before I ordered one of those genetic testing kits, because I've certainly been thinking about it. I'm definitely not going to do it now. All right, folks. It is after 7 o'clock. It's 7:05 in the p.m., so I think you guys know what that means if you listen to the show. It's time for the Happy Happies. We'll be right back after these.